Morning, Donko.
Okay, it's
okay. So let's go ahead and get started with some introductions. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of you to our Fresh Perspective session with Peter Scaturro from Sony. My name is Suzanne Mudge. I'm the Executive Director for Youth Music Monterey. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of many of our YMM students, their families, their teachers. Many of our board members are in attendance. I'd especially like to acknowledge Joanne and Russell Hatch, who are the sponsors for Fresh Perspectives for this season. I'd like to make a special introduction to our music director of YMM, Donko Drusko, and also to Elise Rabideau, who is our South County Strings Director. Kelly Wong, a staff member, is also here. She's behind the scenes and helping out with tech. And Jean Gavrin, who's our Director of Development, is also here, and the mother of the person who helped us secure Peter Scaturro in the first place. So that brings me to Daniel Gavrin. I don't know Daniel Gavrin personally, but I've sure been hearing a lot about him from his parents. Parents talk, they're proud of their kids, and Daniel is no exception. He's a YMM alum. He played flute with our orchestras for I think about 7 years. He is now a senior mission designer with Sucker Punch Productions. He was previously at Infinity Ward for 5 years in LA, working on Call of Duty Ghosts, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, and Call of Duty World War II. Daniel will introduce our presenter, Peter Scaturro, and I'd like to wish a very warm welcome to both of you.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Cool. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you all today. What feels like yesterday, but actually over 10 years ago, I was a flute player in Youth Music Monterey. By the way, I think it's very cool you guys are playing music for the game Advent Rising. While I may no longer play in an orchestra, the knowledge and experience gained from having a music background and playing in YMM has helped me daily in my professional career as a video game designer. Additionally, I get to work with the immensely talented audio department at my studio, Sucker Punch Productions, and the team at Sony Interactive Entertainment. One of the best aspects of my job is getting to work with them on implementing the sound effects and music. In our latest game, Ghost of Tsushima, I was constantly thrilled with how well the music elevated the emotion of our gameplay and cinematics. Recently, I was delighted when my parents, who are still involved with YMM, asked if I knew anyone at work that could speak to you guys, their skilled musicians. I immediately hit up my audio director, and he connected YMM with a member of the Sony music production team that worked with us on Ghost of Tsushima. As a composer, he's worked on many TV shows, and now for years, as a senior producer at Sony, he's worked on implementing music into some of the most popular video games. Please welcome Peter Scaturro.
Daniel, I'm going to have you talk for another minute. Peter Scaturro apparently doesn't have the link yet, so we need to get him going here.
Well, yeah, I could talk about, I guess I can talk about how we'd work on missions for the game. We'd work on the levels for the game, and as we'd work on them, the music would slowly get integrated, and it would just the missions would come alive. It was amazing how I would work on a mission, and I'm playing this thing every day. I'm iterating on it. I'm touching it every day, and the moment the music's put in, it's like I'm playing it for the first time all again, which for me, when I'm working on it, that's very refreshing.
Daniel, I'd be curious around what time you were playing with YMM? How long has it been?
It's been
And
like,
have you been playing the flute recently?
I'll pick it up occasionally. I'll pick it up occasionally. It's been like 10 years. So I think I stopped in like 2000. I think my last year when I would have been a senior in high school was like 2008, 2009, if I remember correctly. I think. And so yeah, it's so I played for like 7 years. So since like 2002, I started in the youth, there's two levels still, right? There was two levels at that time. I started in the first
Junior
one.
youth?
Yeah, junior, and then I went to the upper
Honors.
one, honors. Yeah, and I remember the amount of solos I had to play, and at the time, I still nervous when I had to do this today. Still nervous, but I remember being so nervous for all of those.
Well, I'm so happy to see your face. I only ever heard from you from your parents. So nice to
Very
meet you
happy
here.
to be here. Yeah.
Daniel, a blast from the past. Get back to playing again.
Hey, Gary, how you doing?
Doing fine. Peter's here, but I had to butt in and tell you that.
That was great seeing. I have to call you one of these days.
Please do. Please do.
Hello, everyone.
Oh,
I
I
see
think
Sue. I see Sue there. Sorry, I don't know if anyone can, if you can hear me.
We can hear
can.
you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Great. Sorry, I'm jumping in late here. Forgive me if I'm just sort of taking the floor here. I know Daniel was going to give an intro, and did I just catch the end of Daniel's intro?
Yeah, I did the intro. So take it
Okay.
away.
Okay, fabulous. First of all, really, really happy to be here with everyone today, and thanks so much for having me. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. See, a couple of things, I guess, before sort of I jump in here, like Sue, I'm going to look to you, to sort of jump in and, if there are any questions, feel free to interrupt me. I've got a few things planned about what we can talk about today, and but feel free to jump in. I also have some material that I can share. So I don't know if my Zoom link is set up so that I can share my screen. Kelly or maybe whoever is moderating, if you can just give me that ability. I have some pictures and some videos that I can share with everyone if you want to do that. I guess I thought, well, first of all, I guess I should introduce myself. So I am a music producer for Sony PlayStation. And Daniel and I worked on a video game that came out this year called The Ghost of Tsushima. I don't know if anyone has heard of this, but it's a fabulous game. All right, I see Sue, is that you waving? Have you've heard of it?
Yep.
Anyway, this is a fabulous game. Daniel, did you just out of curiosity, did you give any background about the game and what it's about?
No, not really. So go ahead and do that.
You want me to take it away? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, feel free to help me if you want.
Sure.
This is, I'll say this, this is a really interesting video game that was created and released by Sucker Punch. Then this is the video game developer that Daniel works for. And the video game is set in 12th century feudal Japan. And it's the setting is the island of Tsushima. So for those of you who might not know about the island of Tsushima, it's an island that is Japanese territory that exists between Japan and South Korea. And what happened was and this is actual history, not the video game. The Mongols had invaded Tsushima with the intention of invading Japan. So the video game, The Ghost of Tsushima, is based on that history. And as your player, you play as this fictitious samurai by the name of Jin. And he is one of just a couple of samurais that survived after the Mongols had invaded Tsushima. So I'm going to be talking about the music production of that game because I thought that would maybe give you a sort of a more sort of tangible idea of the things that I wind up doing. And I guess what I'm also hoping that might come out of this talk here is for those of you who are not familiar with what a music producer does or how music is produced for video games, then maybe I can just shed a little bit of light on that. So anyway, so what do? I tried to boil this down to one sentence, and the best that I could come up with was that I'm responsible for the creation of the music and the scoring of the video game. So that means not only the music that's produced, but it means how does it play back in the video game. So even though I'm responsible for doing that, we have a whole team at Sony PlayStation that helps to support this endeavor. There's a lot of steps that are involved here, and I'm going to go into some of them. So anyway, I just want to be clear about that. Is that I just have the privilege of working with a really talented, very creative team, and I'll tell you more about what everyone does there. So as a music producer, okay, since I'm responsible for the music and the scoring of the video game, so what does that mean? You know, what is sort of the day-to-day things that I wind up doing? So I'm going to take you through that. So the first thing that I do is when, you know, after sort of knowing that Sony is going to be producing this game, is that I meet with the creative leads of the game. And this would be the equivalent to maybe a director on the film. And what they do is that they talk me and our team through the story. What is this game about? So some of the top level things that I mentioned to you about Ghost of Tsushima already, about where it's set and what the story is about, we learn all of that for the first time by talking to the creative leads. So it's a good opportunity for us to be able to really listen really intently. You know, what are the creative, what are we going for on this game? You know, what is the message? What is the overall feeling that we also want to leave the player with for this game? So we talk about that. The other thing that we talk about is, which is very important, but not nearly as exciting, is what is the budget for this? So, and this is a big part of my responsibility, why I kind of bring it up right now, because we want to sort of get an idea about, well, does this permit us maybe to have an orchestral score? Are we going to be, are we going to want to do something more sort of with soloists? Are we going to do something that's more of an electronic score? So getting those two things under our belt for me at our initial meeting kind of sets the stage for what happens next. So what happens next is the more exciting part, and that is that I work on putting together what is a production plan. And the production plan includes a lot of steps. The most important one, and probably the most visible one, is finding the right composer that's going to compose the music for this video game. So I work on that, and I'll get back to that a little bit later in the talk. I also discuss with our team and with the developer what musicians are we going to use. So in this case, with Ghost of Tsushima, it was very, very important to the creative leads that this game has a sense or feeling of authenticity. So bearing that in mind, that was something that really gave us some direction on what kind of musicians we were going to use for this. And I'll get back to that too. We also took a look at what support talent are we going to need outside of just the composer writing the music, the musicians playing the music, and that is, where are we going to record it? What kind of engineering talent are we going to need for this? What kind of orchestration talent are we going to need? So we take a look at all of that, and then of course we take a look at the schedule. When do we need to do this? And what we try to do is time the recording and the composition of the music so that it kind of works in parallel to the development of the video game. As Daniel knows intimately, for those of you who are not kind of on the inside of video game production, it takes a long time. And you may not know that already. It's a complicated endeavor. It's similar and more time consuming than maybe the production schedule for an animated film, which if some of you are more familiar with films, you'll know that that can be a pretty time consuming film to make. So it's even more than that. It's not uncommon for a video game to be in production for 4 or 5 years. It's not uncommon for our music team to be involved in the production of the music for, I'd say, at least 2 years. So anyway, those are important things to sort of know, to keep in perspective, because I'm going to be talking a little bit about how video games are a little bit different than maybe concert music or also scoring a film. So last, in terms of sort of like more of the day-to-day things that I'm responsible for, and this is something that is where, that is completely unique to video games. And that is that initially we think about, how is the music going to play in the game? And if you think about it, I'm sure everyone on this call here has played video games. So you know that as you're playing the video game, you are the player. You are making choices about where you want to go and where you want to do what you want to do. So what you really need to have happen is that the music needs to be able to respond to what you're doing. So understanding the relationship of how the programming works for the video game, what the player is able to do, and how that is going to influence not only how the music plays in the game, by what sort of scheme, also that informs the composition. You know, what kind of music do we actually need to be written for this, and how are we going to write the music? So that's a really important and fundamental distinction about scoring for video games, is that you are scoring an interactive system. So there you go. That's kind of what I do in terms of sort of the specific things. I also do want to just I guess underline that this is not me solo. I have the privilege of being able to direct like a really talented team. So there's a lot of hands in doing this. By the way, just so sorry to just sort of sidetrack here, but we have until noon. Is that correct, Sue?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. I'll keep my eye on the clock, and we'll see if we can get through it all.
It's okay
Pardon?
for you. It's okay for you to go overtime.
Okay, well, you know, I could probably talk all afternoon, so you know,
All right.
you might want to call timeout at some point, which is a-okay. So, you know, when I was thinking about all of you today, I was, you know, I was putting myself in your shoes, particularly some of the students that play in the orchestra here. I had a very similar start. And I thought maybe one of the things that I could do is talk about my career path. So what happened to me when I was in middle school and in high school, and how did I come to have this kind of a job? I'll tell you right off the bat, I never expected to be doing this job. And this is a similar story for those of us who are in the entertainment industry. In fact, this job didn't even exist, I think, when I was in high school or middle school. So, so maybe one of the takeaways from this is, and I'll go through all the details here just so you can have sort of an idea in your mind, is that, you know, careers, particularly in music, you know, they don't follow a linear path, you know, so, and part of it, I think, is sort of recognizing that and understanding that, you know, you go towards a goal, but along the way, you know, you have some twists and turns in your life. And that certainly was the case for me. So to get into sort of specifics of my story, I was playing classical piano from the time that I was, you know, fairly young. And, you know, really enjoyed that, and got, I guess, sort of similar to, I'm sure many of you on this call, just kind of getting the fundamentals of music, understanding that. And I found out early on in my life that I was really passionate about this. I love this. And my world then started to expand outside of classical music. When I was in high school, I really took a love to popular music. And something really kind of got in my head right at that point. And that was just a real sort of passion and interest in record making, and a real interest in the technology behind that. So that was always something that kind of stuck in my head as I was trying to learn how to play some other instruments. I learned how to play the guitar, I learned how to play the bass. I was kind of like a rhythm section type of guy. So, and that was my passion all through high school. And that led me to when I got to the point of making a decision about where I wanted to go for my college education. I chose UC San Diego. Now, this was back a while ago. I'm not going to say exactly when, but you know, computer technology at that point and music was really just on the forefront of becoming something that was accessible cost-wise to us mere mortals. So I was very lucky to sort of be on this cusp of when music or when sort of computer-based or digital technology was just starting to become available. And that's what led me to UC San Diego, because they were one of the few universities at that point that had a computer music department. And I thought, oh, this is for me. So I went off to college, and I was just sorely disappointed. And I was disappointed for a couple of reasons. One was, while I was there, I was in their music education or the music department, and I was studying 20th century classical, sort of, you know, modern classical music. A lot of avant-garde music is kind of what UC San Diego had specialized in at that point. And I felt at the time I didn't understand it, you know, and I think it was, you know, kind of like went above my head a little bit. I just thought, what am I was expecting a more sort of vocational education. I wanted to make records. So, you know, show me where the recording studio was. So anyway, it was very academic for me. And I stuck with it, but I felt like I was just sort of fish out of water there. This is not what I had expected. So, and here's sort of the important point for me at that stage of, I guess, my career or my life, is I decided to then go on a parallel major into computer science. And I really took to that at that point. This is something that just grabbed me as passionately as music. And I have to say, I thought my music career was pretty much over at that point. And I was resigned and okay with, you know, maybe doing more of a sort of a programming type of job. So anyway, getting back to the fact that life is never linear and things unexpectedly happen, what happened to me was that my friends and I, and we played in a pop band in the Bay Area at the time. You know, to give a little bit more detail, I had gone from UC San Diego. I was now over in UC Berkeley. So I was living up in the Bay Area. Anyway, continuing my education and still expecting to be involved in programming and computers on that level. So my friends and I wound up getting a record deal. And we were, you know, kind of a wild sort of punk funk band, and we were playing in San Francisco and all the clubs at that time, and we were really enjoying ourselves. And we found ourselves with this record deal, and I decided at that point, okay, let's see this through. And we did. We wound up going on tour, and we wound up putting out a record. I wound up recording the record, our debut record in New York, and having just some absolutely mind-expanding experiences, you know, with all of this. It was just wonderful. I'd never traveled at all, and we were doing tours in Europe and doing tours in the U.S. and had the privilege of opening up for a lot of popular bands at the time. What I learned out of all of this was that I didn't like performing really that much, or at least to that extent, because, you know, that kind of life and being on the road and playing is really exciting for a while until, you know, you realize that, wow, this is hard. And, you know, here I am, you know, sitting in a bus and traveling to a new city day after day. So that kind of ran its course. But then I found myself at a different point in my life, having had that experience and having gotten a bit better, I think, at like synthesizers at that point and computers and technology. You know, that was kind of still my thing, and I was sort of carving a niche out for myself. So I started playing on other people's records as a session musician, and eventually wound up, and I never expected this, landing a composer job on a show called Unsolved Mysteries. Now, some of the maybe some of the parents, you know, might remember Unsolved Mysteries, but it was, you know, a huge hit and really unexpected, and began my career with as a composer for television, which I did up until about 10 years ago. Moved to Los Angeles, where I am now with my wife, and we have a middle school daughter and a high school daughter as well. And to finish off my story, as I was working on my scoring television shows, which I did for over 20 years or so, I found myself wanting to expand a little bit from that. And a friend of mine recommended me for the job that I have now with Sony. And I guess the rest is history that you know. I've been with Sony now for over 10 years producing. Now, what I've noticed is that even though I could not have predicted that or known that, what I love about what I'm doing is that it appeals to the things that I originally wanted to do, which is be involved in technology. I was interested in recording. Of course, you know, I thought it was records at that time, but essentially the same kinds of skills that back when I was early in high school thought interest me really apply to this job. So anyway, for anyone who might be on this call who's thinking about, oh, you know, where should I go to college? You know, what am I going to do? I would say think deeply about that, but don't be anxious about it, because, you know, life has a way of sort of opening up doors for you and making opportunities happen for you. And I think if you just pay attention to those when they come up, everything's going to work out. If it's worked out for me so far, I'm absolutely certain it can work out for everyone on this call who might be having that kind of question at this point. So anyway, I'm going to pause there and maybe delve a little bit more into specifically the Ghost of Tsushima and how we wound up producing that score. Does that sound good to everybody? All right, I'm seeing some thumbs up. I'm gonna get a glass of water here though for a minute because I've been talking a lot. All righty. Let's see. Let's see. Let me get back to my list of what it is that I do, and here it is. And then I can really like show you exactly how that applies to sort of making this score. I have some slides that I want to share here. So let me try and set that up and give that a go, and let's just make sure that everyone can see the slides, and that's all cool. Let's see. Let me do this. I think you can see my screen. Okay. Does everybody see on their screen? They should see one picture, and it's of a composer by the name of Shigeru Umebayashi.
Yes.
Is that what everyone's seeing? Okay, great. So, getting back to like, how does a score get produced? I had our meeting with the creative leads at Sucker Punch, the folks who were creating the Ghost of Tsushima. And what was really important to them with this game is that it has a sense of authenticity. And they really wanted for you as the player to feel like you were there in sort of this history of Japan, and that when you were on the island, when you were playing this game, you really had that feeling. So to us, what that meant is that we needed to have some music that really pushed front and center Japanese instruments that are particular to Japan. And that's what we really wanted to do. Now, we knew we had a story that was kind of grand and intimate at the same time, which posed an interesting challenge. So the part that was grand was that you had this big Mongol invasion on the island of Tsushima, intent of making their way to Japan. So this is a big deal. Intimate because our protagonist here, Jin, the person that you're playing with, is suffering a lot of loss and sadness in what happens in the opening scene here, which is that his samurai clan is defeated and destroyed by the Mongols. So it's about his personal journey, and it's also about making sure that we have a tone and a feel for the music that really reminds us of Japan. So with that in mind, we started doing what we normally do at that point, is looking at composers, anyone in the world, and thinking, well, okay, who is going to be right for writing the music here? And maybe this is a little bit of info for anybody who is an aspiring composer that might be on this call, is that for a person like myself, my vantage point in the industry, having a, let's say, sort of client here is the way I kind of think about it sometimes, which is Sucker Punch, our developer and our creative leads, trying to find, I think, what is going to be like a good match here. Who is the right composer for this game? And the way that we judge that is based on work that you've done in the past. So Shigeru Umebayashi, who you see on the screen right now, was a perfect candidate for us. Obviously, Japanese composer, renowned Japanese composer. He had composed the score among many, many films that he's done: House of Flying Daggers, Curse of the Golden Flower. These were scores that we had identified and thought that, oh, if we had music like that for the Ghost of Tsushima, then that would be kind of what we're going for, or in the ballpark. So that's how we settled on Shigeru Umebayashi. We didn't have just one composer on this project, though. There was a lot of music to write here. There's over 2 hours of music. And hello? Oh, sorry, I thought I heard someone. So we wound up also hiring another composer, and this is a British composer by the name of Ilan Eshkeri. And one of the things that we noticed with working with Shigeru Umebayashi, who's more commonly known as Ume, so I'm going to refer to him as Ume, is that Ume, while being really familiar with how to score a film, was not really up on video games. So we felt like what we need to do is use the material that Ume provided and think about the direction and the foundation that he sort of created in terms of an aesthetic, but also supplement that with someone who also knew about Japanese music, but knew a little bit more about modern video games. And that was Ilan Ascari. Now, Ilan had composed the music to 47 Ronin, which was a samurai movie, I think starring Keanu Reeves, which had an interesting score to it. He had also, Ilan had worked with Ume in the past. They scored a film, I think it was Stardust, working together. So they knew each other. And Ilan had also recorded a score for a movie, composed a score for a movie called Coriolanus, which was not a samurai movie, but had like an interesting sort of stylized sound to it that we felt like was sonically something that we thought would apply to the Ghost of Tsushima, knowing that the Ghost of Tsushima, while it needs to sound like Japanese music, it's not going to be authentically Japanese music as it would have existed, I think, in the time that of the exact setting of the game. And that's because, and you can even see it in the artwork of the game, it's like sort of a stylized version of what was happening at that point. It obviously rooted in history, so it has a sense of authenticity to it. So anyway, just to give you a little bit of insight into our thinking at the time, we felt like Ilan was going to be a really nice partner to contributing to this score. So from that, we started to think about, well, how are we going to record the score, and where should we record the score? Let's see. I'd like my next slide to come up. There we go. This score, interestingly, was recorded on 3 different continents. So we usually go to England and London specifically, and we record the orchestra there. We knew we wanted to have a grand score, so we're going to need the power of the orchestra, and we needed to have our Japanese solo instruments be in the front of that, creating that Japanese flavor. So the place that we generally record in London, there are two recording halls there, Air Studios and another studio that probably most everyone's heard of called Abbey Road. So we record at both of those locations. For this one, we went for Air Studios. This was, for anyone on the call who knows or is interested in Beatles history, this studio was started by George Martin, who is the producer of the Beatles and has existed as a recording studio now for decades. So this is a converted church that's in London. And here is a view of inside the church, inside one of the recording rooms. There are many, but this is the largest one. This is called the hall. And you can imagine just by looking at the size of this, like having pews in this, and you can see that there's a balcony. So this operated as a church. In the back of this, right in the middle of the picture, you can see there's a pipe organ there. And here's a little bit better view of it. The pipe organ doesn't work anymore. They use it as an air conditioner, which is kind of a little interesting aside there. So, but the pipe organ doesn't work, but it certainly, it looks great. Here is a picture of the hall with some string players and some brass players in it, just to give you an idea about, well, what does this look like? I should just pause here for a minute and just maybe talk about, well, why do we go to London? You all play in an orchestra. What's different about this orchestra? And I can tell you, it's really boils down to really one major thing. This orchestra specializes in recording, and the musicians there are really good at sight reading, and they're really good at playing together as a group. And they know each other really well. So, bowing, articulation, things like that, is something that they really understand how to do that together, because they're playing together all the time, doing this specialized kind of work. It's to me, it's fascinating to see just the level of talent here. It is not uncommon for this orchestra to be given music that they have never seen before, and maybe do one practice run through, and by the second take, we're getting the actual final score. They're really, really brilliant musicians. So, so that's why we go to London, is to work with this group in this room. Here is just a picture of inside the control room of the recording studio. So you can see the big recording desk that's there, and you can see some of the folks that are involved in making this happen. Let's see, I don't know if you can see no, I don't think you can see my pointer. So I'll describe right in the middle, kind of slumped in his chair, that's Ume. This was one of his recording sessions. And we have recording engineers that are there. We have booth readers. That means that we have people who are reading the score, listening to what the orchestra is playing, pointing out changes that we want to make in the music on the fly. A lot of that generally has to do with dynamics and articulation, and making sure if there's any wrong notes in the score or anything that's misplayed, that we're catching that. So that's why you see all of the folks that are there in the control room at this point. Let's see, moving on and talking more about outside of the orchestra, some of the soloists or the more sort of Japanese particular instruments that we record. Here are some taiko drums, and we recorded taiko drums not only in the UK, but actually in every location, which, to let you know, was Tokyo and Los Angeles. But this was our taiko ensemble, which is a little bit smaller ensemble that we recorded in London. Thought I'd just sort of throw this up here just for anyone who is interested about, okay, well, what does the music look like? Well, this is one of the score books. This one happens to be fairly thin. I don't know why, they're usually like really thick, because we're there generally for about a week, and sometimes recording maybe 25 plus cues, generally like an hour and a half's worth of music at a shot. So we do, as part of our production process, not only do we have to get the music composed, but also orchestrated, and then eventually finding its way into something like this. This is a bound book that we use in the control room. Going to move on to Japan. We thought that, this makes perfect sense, doesn't it? That we need sort of Japanese solo instruments. It's very important to the developer that this have a sense of authenticity. So we thought, okay, well, let's go to the source. And this is where we wound up recording some Japanese instruments. These are really particular to Japanese history. So you can see this instrument is kind of like a guitar. It's called the shamisen. It's played with this really large sort of triangular pick that you can see in the right hand of the player there. And this has a really distinctive sound. Another Japanese instrument equally as distinctive is the shakuhachi. So you can see Sugawa-san here, who is just a master at this, who's just an absolutely incredible player playing the shakuhachi. This is a kodo. However, this one is kind of interesting. This is the first time that I saw this, and this is a bass kodo. So like a regular kodo, but obviously goes a little bit lower. One of the things that there's a scene in the game where it's very dramatic. This is the funeral for Jin's father, and this is before the invasion, so it's kind of a flashback. And they have this kind of Japanese funeral. So what we wanted to do to sort of keep that sense of authenticity was actually get the actual sort of Buddhist chants that they might sing when, during a funeral. So we found through our contractor there, these Buddhist monks who were just absolutely brilliant and contributed to the score in that way. We also had a taiko ensemble that was in Japan. This was our largest ensemble, 8 players. I actually have a video of this that we'll see if we have enough time for. I'll play that so you can hear that. But they were absolutely brilliant. So there's a picture of them. This is a picture of how we record. And for those of you who might have your own DAW, digital workstation. This one is Pro Tools. This is what we use to record on. Some of you might be familiar with that if you use like Logic or even GarageBand is kind of a stripped down version of the same thing as this. And here's another look inside the control room of one of the studios we used in Tokyo. I'm just going to talk about some of the recording we did in the United States, because what we found is that at some point we needed to supplement the score, and there were some players that we could only find here. This was not one of them, by the way. Even though we recorded Radik in the US, he's actually from Mongolia, and he is a Mongolian throat singer, and he's playing a traditional Mongolian instrument here called morin khur. Here is another Japanese instrument. This is called the biwa, and we recorded this in Los Angeles. And here is another shakuhachi player. This is Ko, and he plays with Yo-Yo Ma, among other really well-known classical musicians. We did a little bit more koto here. Here's another shamisen player here, an American by the name of Mike Penny, who's just absolutely brilliant. And we had a vocalist, a Japanese vocalist here. This is Claire Uchima, and she is just an infinitely interesting person. Her mother was Scottish, her father was Japanese, and she can speak Japanese, and you'll hear a song that she sang and provided the lyrics for. She also sings with Harry Styles, by the way, just sort of a little more info about Claire. She was great. So I think that's the end of the slides that I wanted to show you. If everyone's feeling good, maybe what I can do is I can play a video for you if you'd like, and you can get to hear maybe parts of this score. Okay, it's going to be set to some of the gameplay, so you'll get a chance to look at some of the game play there. You'll see it's a samurai. There's some sword fighting back and forth. It's not scary. It's kind of cartoony. So just know that going in. And I may stop and talk a little bit, but I'll try to let it run. It's about 7 minutes, so just to give you an idea there. So let's give this a shot. Okay. Now I'm going to play this. Sue, I'm looking to you. If for some reason, it's not loud enough, or if it's not playing, or you can't see it, any technical things, just wave your arm, okay? And I'll stop, okay?
Got it.
All right, here we go. All right, hopefully you guys heard that. I'm going to stop right there. Which was played on the cello there. Just keep that in the back of your mind. That's one of the main themes for our main character here, Jin. And as you can see in this scene where there's some devastation after the Mongol invasion, it's a very sad sound. But this comes back in a couple of different forms. Pretty soon after this scene, we'll hear Claire singing a tune. She's going to sing the exact same melody with some Japanese lyrics over another sad scene where Jin's horse dies. And then you'll hear the same theme at the very end of the game, where as a climax of the game where Jin actually battles his uncle. So anyway, spoiler alert there. So I'm going to start it back again so you can hear that cello one more time, and then I'm just going to let it roll.
I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm not a samurai.
That's the biwa right there.
Face death and defend
Really hear
our
the
home.
Japanese instruments in that last little bit.
Tradition, courage, honor. They are what make us. We are the warriors of Tsushima. We are samurai! Follow Lord Shimura to victory! Kill them all! People of Yarikawa, hunt every Mongol to the last man! Spare no one! For Yarikawa! Yarikawa! No mercy! Cut them down! Take their heads! Everyone to the gates! Push through! For the north! You are Jin Shimura, loyal servant to the Shogun. my heir. My son. I am not your son. I am a ghost. And you will be judged for it. Find the Khan. Taka. We will be remembered forever. No, you will be forgotten. I am ready.
So you'll hear the main theme again here now with the full orchestra. There you have it. It's a little bit of the Ghost of Tsushima score. So I feel maybe this might be a good point. You can tell me, Sue, if you agree where, we might be able to just sort of pause here and see if anyone has any questions. Maybe that would be the best use of our time.
Certainly, I think that's fine. I'll look in the chat, but perhaps Daniel might also have a few questions he's collected for you.
Sure thing.
Just a quick question that Michael O had earlier on is, how old were you when you started, I think, playing piano?
I started when, I guess I was about 8. So I was sort of dabbling around. We had this little home chord organ. And anyway, I took a liking to it. And then soon after that, my parents, who I am eternally grateful to, just were very supportive then after that for me starting piano lessons. So I want to say, might have been around 10 or so, really, when I started practicing and trying to stick to a regular schedule also. Trying to get that discipline, which was not easy.
Not easy. So when you're recording, when you're getting the music for the orchestra to record, do you have an idea of where all this music is going to go on into the game prior to them recording it, or do you get all that music and then kind of take it and start cutting it? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's a combination of them both. So for some key cinematic scenes, which are called, this is where like the player doesn't have control. So moments in the story that are generally those really sort of emotional moments, that's all pre, we generally have those scenes custom scored, and that's kind of like a movie. So we know exactly where that music is going to go. We also have a sort of a general idea for more of the action music. So we haven't gotten into this part on the call here, but we have, but I did touch on it at the beginning, is that, part of what makes a video game music is its interactivity. So we will record some action music knowing that that's going to underscore the action scenes, but not necessarily anything specific.
Looks like we have some questions in the chat already. So I'll ask you them. Quick from Francis C. Like what's like one of your favorite games that you've worked on? You've worked on a bunch.
Well, this one for sure. God of War. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that game. Love that entire franchise. I've really had one of the nicest, I think, opportunities that has come to me over my time here at Sony is to work with our Japanese developers. So there's a very famous developer there called From Software that makes these incredibly difficult, challenging games for gamers. It's a gamer's game, and I've worked on a couple of those. One of the more sort of recent games that came out on the PS5. This is something that's exclusive to the PS5. Is a remake of one of their older games, and that's another one. I kind of fall in love with all of them, to be honest with you. With them for a long time, and I like them all. But there are a few highlights there.
ONS. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's a couple of questions in the chat, one from Owen and one from Eldar Hudiev, that are somewhat related. Do you see those, Daniel?
Yeah. When you look for composers, if you're judging judging them based off their previous work, how would like a new up and coming composer get noticed?
Great, super good question. I'm not going to be, I don't want this to come off as cheeky, but in some ways, don't try. This is what I've kind of noticed from, in my travels here, is that just like this particular game where I sort of described the process of working with the creative leads at Sucker Punch and then trying to find like a match. It's kind of like, almost like dating in a sense, trying to find who is the right composer for this project. And generally, when we're going through that process, we're not looking for a generalist. Okay, so we're not looking with someone who's just sort of good at scoring. We're looking at someone who has a particular expertise and has demonstrated that in previous scores. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly what we're looking for, because we are experienced enough to like kind of read between the lines. You may have caught that a little bit in my description of Alon's contribution to the score in particular. So I would say that when I say don't try to get noticed, what I'm really meaning is that the most important thing is to first off have like a passion for what you are doing as an artist. So, for example, and I'm just making something off the top of my head. Let's say that you like ambient music and you like country music. Okay, put them together and make your own style. Make something that you feel really good about, and try to connect with an audience out there. And we are so lucky to be living in the time that we are right now. There's so many ways to reach a global audience. So I would say get yourself a YouTube channel or a SoundCloud account. Make some music and just put it out there and see what people think about it. I will guarantee you this, that it will be noticed. If it's notable, it will be noticed. So this is something that I would not have known 10 years ago. But having had the view that I do now, I really want to tell you, it doesn't matter how obscure. If it is something that is going to find its way to being a match to what other film, game might be in production, believe me, people have their ear to the ground, and it does filter up to people like myself if I don't notice it myself. So now take all of this as sort of top level advice. In addition to this, what you really need to do is be a great composer, really good on your instrument, have some friends that you like to make music with, understand like what it's like to have to write music. If you're writing some music for someone and it's a video game and they need the music by next Friday, make sure you have the skills to be able to like produce the music and get it by next Friday. As an example, I'm just sort of pulling out of the air. So what I'm not saying is don't study, you need to. I'm not saying don't get experience, you need to do that. I'm not saying don't work for other composers, you need to do that. I'm not saying don't know about the business. You kind of need to do that and understand what the expectations are. But bottom line, do not lose sight of your artistic love. And for what brought you to music in the first place is the most important thing to always hold throughout your entire career. Can I be a little bit less passionate, maybe?
I thought, sorry if I blunder any names, but Ishani C, I thought had an interesting question saying, do you use Western notations for the Japanese instruments? And
Ooh,
I know
Westerns
and samurai films there's a lot of relation there.
Yeah, so in general, yes. Of course, this is, in the context of modern orchestral music. So, where we're making sure that we're all in sort of the same key and same tuning and all of that. I have seen and was exposed to the first time during Ghost of Tsushima, recording that, of like what more traditional shakuhachi notation looks like. It's amazing, and has no relation really to what Western notation is like. However, being in now 2021, our baseline of communication about music is Western notation, so that's what we used.
And to answer Robin's question about Subnautica, I've definitely played that game and I've definitely enjoyed that game, and I know it has a beautiful soundtrack. It's something I gotta jump into again. Are there any questions I missed in the chat?
I think you got them all. I'm just wondering if we have any direct questions from the audience. Anyone want to raise their hand or put more questions into the chat?
Do you so how do you get inspiration? Do you listen to soundtracks? Do you play games to get kind of inspiration for how they do music and innovate?
I do play our games. I have to admit, I'm an adult child. I really dig them. I am feel so lucky to, and Daniel, you know this intimately. There is so much innovation that's happening around video games, particularly in the depth of the storytelling. We can look at another game that was released this year, The Last of Us 2, which I think has sort of raised the bar in many ways about who are, what kind of stories, what kind of heroes, can you have in video games. And yeah, I do play them. And I also feel like when we're working on a video game and we're doing the work that I was sort of describing here, you have to understand we're mostly playing a broken video game. So it's really nice, once it gets released, and it's really only at the last, kind of phase of it that, it really becomes playable from, beginning to end. Oftentimes that's not the case. So I really do like to actually play the games after they're released, and in my own way, just kind of think about, okay, what was successful? What could we do better, and all of that. So, yeah, I do. Or I should say, I play our PlayStation games. My daughters play like a whole bunch of stuff that, I don't know, I'm not hip to.
Oh, sorry, scrolled down. Maybe you can just go quickly through. Someone asked if you do play violin, or maybe you can just go like what I see a piano back there. I see a guitar. What instruments do you play?
Well, let's see. I can play keyboards pretty good. I can play piano less good. I can play guitar less good than that. And I can also play bass. And that's it. I've tried a bunch of other instruments, but no, didn't happen for me.
Edward has a question. Maybe my dad, Edward. What other careers, maybe in video games or in movies, can being a musician help move you towards?
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about what some of our staff at Sony does, and we didn't have time to delve into this particular subject really in much depth today, but that has to do with how do you create an interactive music system. And what essentially that is that how do you take the material that you record on the stage, meaning at Air Studios or Abbey Road, and then turn that into an interactive score. Essentially, two major things happen. One is when we do our recording, we try to do sections in isolation so that there's no bleed. So when we record, it's not, even though we might have like an 80 or 90 piece orchestra, at the end of the day, we don't record 80 or 90 pieces together. We generally will record the strings separately, record the brass separately, percussion separately. And the reason why we do that is that when we are mixing all of the music, we have clear separation between these families of instruments and the solo instruments. And the reason why we do that is because the music that actually you hear in the video game is kind of like a DJ remix of the score. So things like this happen, like, okay, let's say I'm a player and I go through a door and there's going to be some action that's happening there. We may program it, or script it is what it's really called, in such a way where you go through the door and you just hear the percussion. And then maybe you turn the corner and you sort of confronted with, a big fiery dragon or something like that. Then we're going to sort of bring in the brass and bring in all the strings. So making all of those pieces, scripting the logic for the music to behave according to what's happening from the player are two major jobs that our department does that are unique to video games and interactive scores. So in addition to composing, editing, music editing, scripting, in fact, everyone here on this call, if they wanted to, could download for free WISE, W-W-I-S-E. So this is from Audio Kinetic, which is a program just like GarageBand or Pro Tools or that sort of thing, in which you can get some experience in making interactive music. So if anyone's interested in that, I would certainly encourage you to to get some experience using that kind of program.
Can you put the program in the description?
Sure.
In the chat.
In the chat. Oh, it looks like it's already there. WWISE.
And I'm sorry again if I mess up the name. Noemi V. you talked about this a little bit, but maybe you can go a little more detail about how how composing for a video game is different than composing for a movie. Like what types of things, direction do you have to give a video game composer that's different from a movie composer?
All right, another really, really great question. So here's the main difference. With a movie, you are generally seeing the scene and you are composing the music so that the music and the scene are connected, frame by frame. With a video game, there's some of that, but most of it is that you are looking at a scene and you are writing music that will work under the scene, but is not sort of tied to this sort of linear sort of frame by frame moment. So to give you sort of a specific example about that. Okay, when you watched the video, you saw that there were some action fighting scenes that were going on. So we may give, let's say, 5 minutes of that of that video to a composer and say, hey, write some music that will feel appropriate under this, but don't feel like you have to, hit in the music any particular thing that happens in the game, because it's going to be somewhat random anyway. The music is always going to play back differently to the scene because it's based on what you, the player, are doing. So that's the main difference.
One interesting thing I can mention is a lot of the music also is very reactive to what the player is doing. Like there's often that they'll make systems that, like for example, Spider-Man. Everyone knows Spider-Man, and it's a game Sony did as well. That as you're swinging through the city of Spider-Man, like the music actually responds to the different ways you swing through the city. So it's very, very reactive to the player.
Absolutely.
Danko asks if we've heard the score of Advent Rising. I listened to it a bit preparing for this, and I liked it a lot. I mentioned the game to a friend of mine, and even though it's like he was like, "Oh yeah, I know that game," and he even mentioned the score. Were you able to? Have you heard that music?
I haven't. I haven't, but I'm intrigued. I wish I wish I had a little bit more time before I call. I would have checked it out. What is the connection, by the way, with that score and you all?
We're performing it in our orchestras this term.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it's
Fabulous.
the Bounty Hunter section from Advent Rising.
That's cool.
Nice.
That's awesome.
And Sue, I'm kind of curious, like where are you guys getting the scores from?
This is a published score that Danko Drusko, our music director, found.
I see.
I mean, maybe he can talk about it. What we wanted to do was to tie in your presentation and make a connection with our kids and have them work on a piece of video game music. Because it's a big genre. It's huge. And it's something that so many of them do. So Danko had a hard time finding some music that was published and suitable for orchestras. And maybe Danko wants to talk more about that.
Hi, Peter. This is Danko.
Oh, hi, Danko.
It was particularly difficult to find scores or music for youth orchestra that's playable.
Yeah.
I have to be honest. That's also available, publicly available.
Right. Well, the reason why I ask is because I have in the back of my mind if we can work with the Los Angeles Sheet Music Library. I don't know if you use them at all for gathering sheet music, but essentially we could donate, for example, the score to the Ghost of Tsushima to the Sheet Music Library, and then they would lend it. And this is something that is sort of rising to sort of more to the top of my to-do list. It's been a passion that's been bubbling within myself here for quite a long time, because I would like to make some of our PlayStation scores available, because I know they're popular. The soundtracks certainly are popular, but I'd like to make the sheet music scores available for free if possible. So anyway, kind of curious, feel free to like email me if you have any further thoughts about that.
I'd love to, because I think not only for us at YMM, for in general, like you say, students that are playing these games, it will be exciting to be able to play them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, great. Maybe this will be the catalyst for us to make that happen.
You could also consider that if scores are inherently difficult, that really they're meant for just professional orchestras, you can take certain sections of the more familiar music and work with a publisher to create a simpler score that still maintains all the integrity of the original music. And that way it can be disseminated to schools, youth orchestras throughout the country, throughout the world. And film music has reached that particular level at this point. There's so much film music out there, a fair amount of Broadway music, but it gets a lot of play at the school level because they've created simpler arrangements, also keeping more of the advanced arrangements and making those available for sale.
Well, that's great to know. A question that has been in my mind, I've been discussing this with several of our orchestrators over the last couple of years, is to know exactly what is a lineup and what is a level of difficulty that would be like most appropriate for the what we're talking about right now. So that's something that we don't know, and maybe that's something you can help us with.
Be happy to. Yeah, music is graded on 6 levels, from very easy to I think advanced. So one is very, very simple to highly professional, very advanced colleges, for instance. And then within that are various levels, and a lot of it has to do with the instrument ranges, the keys, the rhythm, all those elements of music that make things more and more complicated. So I'd be happy to help out with that. I'm sure Donko would too.
Terrific.
And this just stop me. I'll keep asking questions. Just stop me when we're out of time. Kristen asks, what platforms do we use to make games? And like, we make games on PlayStation, but we use so many different tools to make these games. Like, he uses all this music editing software. We use video editing, Photoshop, 3D modeling tools. There's so many different tools that go into making video games. I couldn't even name them all. What was the most challenging? What's the most challenging project that you've had to work on? Maybe like with the most interesting instruments. I'm sure there's been a few instruments that you've like had to dig up. I'm sure for Ghost of Tsushima it was hard to find certain these musicians.
Yeah, interesting question. Getting anything done is a challenge. I'm sure getting together for rehearsal is a challenge. So things crop up all the time. I like where we are headed though with this one, Daniel, and that is that if we can talk about the shakuhachi in particular for Ghost of Tsushima, it's a fairly esoteric instrument, and there are actually 7 shakuhachi players in total that contributed to the Ghost of Tsushima. And now this is over a recording period of approximately 2 years. So by the time that we got to sort of Tokyo and were recording the shakuhachi player there, who was by far like a master, he was incredible. We had been through the experience of having 6 other players. So you know what, that is a good example of a challenge, but there's a lesson that is always reaffirmed every single time for me with those challenges, and that is that you just have to stick with it and make it happen, and realize that the bottom line is everyone is generally always trying to do their best. So, you know, if you can kind of keep that spirit, that generosity of spirit in mind, you know, as you're facing challenges, then, you know, they seem to eventually get resolved. I've seen like Elder has had his hand up. I think
Yeah,
Peter.
Eldar, I'd like to ask a question live.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been really wonderful. I'm a composer, I'm a violinist, but starting to compose and extremely interested in game music. And it seems like it's working the way I write, but I just don't know how to put my foot in the door, honestly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can talk about that. You know, I touched on this a little bit earlier. It's, you know, I'm going to digress here a little bit. I remember when I was, you know, wanting to really seriously pursue music, sort of on a career side. I remember my folks who were, you know, I mean, they're lovely, but are not in the music business, you know, friends and stuff like that, basically saying things like, well, it's who you know and it's who you're friends with. It's not who you know. In fact, you know, I don't want to say that can work against you, but, you know, it's not a thing to focus on. What I truly believe the thing to focus on, Elder, in your case, is make your compositions public somehow. So the things that you like, you know, whether that's SoundCloud or whether that's YouTube, I'm a little, you know, not quite familiar exactly like well, what's sort of the best way, you know, it could be like a website. It doesn't really matter. But the idea is that if you just kind of put it out there, and if you just try to connect initially with the most important, I think, person in your musical life is your fans, right? And I kind of use that loosely. You know, the people that are going to like the music and listen to the music, connect with them. And, you know, how do you do that? I don't know, but I think if I were starting out and trying to do this as an endeavor, I think I would start to build an online presence for myself and try to participate also in other like composer organizations like the SCL, Society of Composers and Lyricists, good example, you know, in Los Angeles. When I was doing my sort of composing phase of my career, I got a lot of help from BMI. And they were a brilliant source of all kinds of resources. In fact, even conducting, you know, I did a workshop with them, and they helped me also find resources, you know, when I needed them. So, you know, sorry for that answer. I'm sort of stumbling here. You know, I'm feeling like I'm stumbling here a little bit.
I think that's
It's very helpful. Thank you.
it's great because the way I started in my, you know, making video games was I just made stuff. I just, you know, I wasn't even making it for anybody. And eventually I got noticed. Like I didn't go to college for it, but I worked in the, like what we call the mod community for video games, where we're just taking existing games and we're modifying them, and then we're releasing and I just got noticed by the studio Infinity Ward, and that's how I started off in the industry. There's a lot of games being made out there. Like if anyone's heard of the game Fortnite, that game is made on the engine, Unreal Engine, which anyone can download for free. So there's a whole huge group of people just making all these games for free, and I'm sure they need people to make music for their games. So I'm sure you could go and find, go on forums. And Peter, tell me if you've ever heard of anyone that's done this direction, but like, I'm sure you could find people making these games that need music and need composers to make music for them.
Absolutely. Well said, Daniel. There's so much in that that's, I think, really words of wisdom there. Particularly, you've boiled it down to like just make stuff. and yeah, it's also, at least, at this point in my career, I guess I'll apologize in advance, but this is sort of one of the things I feel really strongly is that music is in a lot of ways just kind of a calling. It's the only guarantee also with music, I think, is the fact that we are so fortunate to be, and I want this to come off as corny, but we're dealing with something that is a communication device. It connects us. It doesn't matter, all walks of life, people relate to music. And the fact that I'm even here, being able to address you, and have the really sort of privilege of that is because music is our connecting glue here. So I know I'm veering off topic here a little bit, but Elder, when I think about this kind of question, it just kind of brings me back to, I think, what is sort of the core of music. It's a lifestyle. It's about your life. It's about an expression of who you are. And the best thing to do is take advantage of the modern tools we have to connect with people. So back to you, Daniel, in the sense are there people to connect with? Absolutely. I sometimes do this kind of thing for some schools in Southern California. USC is a good example where they have a gaming department, and they are really proactive at trying to connect their music students with their gaming students. That's a sort of perfect forum, for them geographically to be able to do that, as an example. So,
Thank you.
Peter, I thought I saw your hand up.
There we go.
Oh, cool.
Peter, I was fascinated by your answer, comparing your work to the work for a film, and how you focus on more of a general kind of a mood to create behind the action without being necessarily specific to the action. And I wondered if that means that, in a sense, you relate to the 2 or 3 generation long tradition of theater music, some of which has been absolutely fabulous, entr'acte music and theater music in the 18th, 19th centuries. A really terrific material there. And it seems strange that this ultra modern, high tech, high thinking sort of occupation should be connected to that very most basic thing by the thread, which is a sense and a sensibility to what's happening and to what's being conveyed. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Well, my initial thought is that is a sort of a brilliant connection, and I had never really thought of that before. And if I'm correct me if I'm mishearing this a little bit, but what you're really underlining is the relationship of the music to action, and just seeing how the connection between the theater is a much looser connection, obviously, than to a film, and drawing a parallel with video game music there. I see you nodding, and I think that is an absolutely brilliant comparison. I don't know enough about theater music, to be honest with you, but you've inspired me to, maybe do a little bit of research here, and I may use this parallel in a future talk, if you don't mind, because that is, it's always nice to be able to sort of refer historically to something and see it now in like a modern context. And I think that is a brilliant comparison. Thank you.
Thank you very much for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure.
Another question from the chat. What's the longest you've ever worked on one video game? Like some video games take a while, 3 years, and I came in mid for Ghost of Tsushima, which took 6 years to create. There's a whole story there. But usually the music, I don't know, when did you guys come online to start working on the music? It was like 2 years before we shipped?
I think a little bit longer than that. I think for this one, I remember discussing this with my colleagues one day. I think it was closer to 2 years and 6 months for this. But we had some extensions, right, Daniel?
Yeah.
You know, when it kind of got down to the end there, which I think that's what, you know, kind of added to the timeline there.
Does the orchestration from Joe Brookshire, who I know, does the orchestration ever get fed back to the game developers to adjust the game content? Usually the people putting the music in, which they're usually the last one, some of the last ones in and the last ones out. Like they're playing our gameplay sequences and trying to mix the music to them. And sometimes we'll like go back and forth and we'll talk about it, and and that's how you get really awesome moments where the music and the gameplay really lines up. Like she showed some in the video, like, you know, when you're cressing over the trees and you see the whole battlefield and the music, and then you charge and you get the chanting monks, like that's all the gameplay is there, and then Peter and his team go in and they line the music kind of up with that. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
I don't. That was brilliant. Nice response to that.
Are there any more questions or anything I missed? Sorry if I missed anyone.
So what's next up for all of you? I mean, what a weird year we just went through. What a weird year we're starting off with. What have you done as far as the organization? I imagine rehearsals have probably not happened, certainly as they might have normally been done.
Well, we're rehearsing online.
Okay.
And we've had to break things up into teams where Donko leads the strings. I work with the winds and brass, and Elise is working with percussion. And, you know, we started Fresh Perspectives this year as a way to supplement our online rehearsals, figuring that, you know, in this sort of bleak time of not being able to meet and rehearse in person, it does give us the opportunity to connect with esteemed artists and musicians such as yourself. This whole series has brought about conductors and composers, yourself. We've got a few chamber ensembles coming up. We've had master classes scheduled for virtually every instrument in the orchestra. And I think maybe Donko can talk further about what we're doing, but that's where we are. We sure as heck hope we're back to in-person rehearsals by the fall.
Yeah.
Nothing beats meeting in person.
And we were really excited to have you, obviously, like everyone is for today, but also because we were playing the music for Advent Rising, and I was trying to, describe to them how to feel the music, how percussive things are, and how to get into it when it's the action part of the music, and sometimes the more melodic parts that are very thinly orchestrated versus the very thick and percussive parts. And it's just exciting to see now something that's really up to date, because Advent Rising was the early 2000s, I think. It was an exciting score, but this one is really just more refined.
Nice. Well, kudos to all of you for pivoting, adapting, making last year work. And I see the same sort of timeline, Sue. I mean, fingers crossed, like by the fall, maybe we're back to being able to see each other in person as well as this. So.
Indeed. Yes. Great. Well, unless anyone has any further questions, this might be the opportune time to bring this session to a close. Any last gasps out there? Okay, well, I would like to invite, yep.
I was just going to remind everyone to practice. Continue.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Peter.
There's no
Thank you
substitute.
so much, Peter, for that.
So I'm channeling my mother right now.
But anyway, let's all please give a round of applause, thumbs up to our wonderful presenter, Peter Scaturro.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And Daniel Gavrin for bringing us into the world of video game music. My eyes were certainly opened
Oh, no problem.
and intrigued by this whole presentation. So thank you so very much. And again, thank you to Joanne and Russ Hatch for underwriting our Fresh Perspective series.
Well, thanks for having me. You guys all made my day.
Great. You're welcome.
All right. See you sometime in the future, I hope.
Okay, Peter. Thank you. We'll stay in touch.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.